The Sound Off Podcast. The show about podcast and broadcast. Starts now.
Buzz Bishop. Before 2009, you likely heard him on air at Z95 in Vancouver, where he did nearly every shift on the station. After that, he went to AMP and later XL103 in Calgary, where he's now doing mornings with Samantha Stevens, who, by the way, recently departed Chorus Radio in Winnipeg. I love talking with people who started in radio around the same time I did. Buzz has lots of interests beyond radio, like blogging and websites, technology, and, of course, being a dad of two. What you're about to hear is what happens when radio vets just get together. Now, Buzz Bishop joins me from Calgary.
You know, it's a good thing we had that pre-talk. I can't remember a thing we're supposed to be talking about today now.
Oh, good. And I thought you were all fancy. It's like going on the Today Show or something like that when, you get the pre-interview, make sure they nail down all your anecdotes and so you can tighten them up. It's all good for the show.
Did you ever find that when you had like an artist come in the room and you started talking and then the funny story would come out while you're playing the song and then you go to air and then the interview sucks?
It's just like every morning show, right? Like the best part happens when the mics are off and you start to get halfway down a story. You're like, stop. It's like, Regis Philbin famously wouldn't talk to Kathy Lee before the show because he wanted all that stuff on the air. And so, I don't know, maybe we should all be quiet in the room when the songs are on.
You started in Vernon.
Yep. I was at BCIT and it came to get a summer job. I applied in Trail and I applied at CJIB in Vernon. And Trail was one of those, community cruiser summer gigs. And I'd come back. And that's what people in first year at BCIT were supposed to apply for. But CJIB in Vernon was like a full service radio station. Frank Martina was doing mornings, very frosty, forced CKNW sort of thing. Then you had the general manager, Patrick Nichol, did a talk show in the midday. And then you had an oldies show and then a hot AC afternoon drive. And then it went top 40, playing MC Hammer, Vanilla Ice, Bare Naked Ladies, whatever at night. And so I wanted to be a top 40 guy. I wanted to be Howie the Hitman, Mark of the Dark Allen, right? Tarzan Dan. So I applied for both gigs, knowing that I was only first year and the Vernon job was a second year job because it was full time. It wasn't just for the summer. And I got it. I got both gigs and I chose the Vernon one because it was full time work. I dropped out of school and 30 something years later, my mom still is upset that I don't have a post-secondary diploma. I never finished BCIT. And they hired me thinking, if it works in the summer, then he can stay. And if it doesn't work, we can always send him back to school. And I guess it worked. So I was lucky.
Did you ever go back to Vernon and look around and then think to yourself how lucky you were to work in that environment?
Oh, I've taken my boys. We've stayed overnight and driving back and pointing out where my old house was. Like, if you want to be real, the thing I wish I would have done in Vernon is bought real estate on Okanagan Landing Road because my rent was $300 a month. I think I could have got a nice townhouse for $50,000 back in 1990 when I was there. So really, I kind of wish I had bought a place. But, the kind of gig that you do when you start out in a small town is everything. I did the evening show. I did community cruiser in the summer. You're setting up your own remotes. There were wildfires back in the day and First Nations issues. This is like the Ganawage era, right? So there were some similar things in Vernon. And so I was going out and pretending to be a news guy and getting tape and cutting it up for the news director in the morning. And when you're 20, 21, 22 and you can do everything, I had to read news, I had to schedule music, I had to produce commercials, that's what you want. So yeah, really lucky to get that chance to do it everything. There was some people at BCIT, one of the stars, I can't remember his name, but he was one of the stars, good guys in the second year. And his job was to do overnights at JR Country. And we all thought it was like, wow. But the Brian Antonson and John Ansell and the guys, Terry Garner, that's like, no, you need to go away and you need to work, starting in Vancouver, that's not where you want. So I kind of feel bad, some of these kids who get a gig on the news wheel stations or doing traffic for Skywards or something like that, they get to stay home, but I don't know if they're really learning enough and getting to fail enough. They're kind of stuck in a minimum wage-ish environment where 2, 3, 4 years, they just kind of look at it and go, what am I doing? But if 2, 3, 4 years, they've been making minimum wage in Lloydminster, maybe now they're in Medicine Hat, maybe now they're in Red Deer, moving their way up, right?
And just last week, I was in the Annapolis Valley where I got my start. And I feel to this day, and by the way, we're talking summer of 1990, just like you were talking summer of 1990, about how connected I wound up becoming to that community because of the radio that I was doing, where I had to stop in every farming town to do every bingo, to do every auction, every ribbon cutting for, a dog show, whatever was going on, digging scallops, lobster sizes, whatever was lobster contest, whatever that was going on.
Yeah.
As a result, I feel more connected to that community today, and I know my way around better than I do where I am now in Winnipeg. And I've been here for about 15 years and I don't feel connected one bit. And that may be because of the technology we're doing now, the type of work that is involved with radio, like you just mentioned.
Like when you talk about like that local connection and all the people, I remember, when I was there, the Vernon Lakers won the Centennial Cup for, I guess that would have been Junior A. Their sort of parade when it happens. And, our general manager was also a city councillor, and our tagline was closest to the community. And there's the Vernon Winter Carnival, which is epic. And so you're right. You do become, when you're in that small town and everybody knows each other, you can become way more connected, invested in what it means to be local. And I think that's a good lesson to learn as you move up, right? There's syndicated morning shows in this country that have to keep it generic. And when you get to be local and say a street name or know what's happening, I think you connect to the people who you're with. So learning it from a small town is something I think that's served me well through the whole career. Yeah.
Have you done the syndicated thing at all?
I've done it like a little bit. When I was at Z in the 90s, I did like the Canadian Hot 20. So that was just like a countdown show that went on everywhere. I did some album launches for Avril Lavigne, Christina Aguilera, stuff like that. And then when I was doing middays at XL in Calgary here, I was asked to do middays at Capital FM in Edmonton. So I would get up at 5 a.m. and watch the morning live TV shows from Edmonton. Rob Christie was doing mornings there at the time, Rob and Audie. And I would listen or try and pay attention to what's happening there, then show up to work an hour early and pre-voice track for Edmonton, and then go and do my Calgary midday show. And to this day, I still, it's not syndicated in the sense that it's live, like one show that's sent everywhere, but I do voice track for Z from Calgary. I do Saturday mornings and Sunday evenings. And then I'm also Swing, where I'll fill in for their morning show or afternoon drive or middays.
How'd you get to Z? Did you go to Z right after Vernon?
Yeah. So I was in Vernon from 1990 to 1993, and I started sending out tape in 1991. After 18 months there, I was ready for the next stop. And so that was AM 106 in Calgary, and that's CKOM in Regina, and that is Peterborough, and that's Vancouver. And, just kept in touch. I started to reach out and, get feedback from people that's sending it to, I can't remember, but Edmonton. So sending tapes out over and over and over again for 18 months and not really getting anything. And then in the spring of 1993, I went to the Junos on my own dime to do what I thought would be like a little broadcast tour. Because, when you're in BCIT, they send you up on a bus and you all the way to Prince George. You meet the radio stations and the TV stations, and then you stop at Williams Lake and Quesnel and Kamloops and Kelowna and Penticton, and then kind of come back. So you meet all the people in the province who might hire you for a summer gig. And I'm like, well, that was great. I met tons of people. So maybe I'll go and I'll do my own little broadcast tour. So I went out to the Junos in 1993, met a bunch of people there, Pat Holliday at, some of the showcases like with the Tea Party or something like that. And we were a Rogers station. So I went and watched Tarzan Dan do his show in Eaton Center, just stanchions, kids lined up for his whole show, just signing autographs. And Cat Spencer was doing evenings. So I was just trying to meet people, right? And I took the train up to Ottawa and for the launch of Cool FM there. And nothing happened in the spring, but then by the summer of 1993, Brad Phillips offered me the chance to come back to Zed and do Saturdays and Sundays, the shifts I'm doing now. I did Saturday night, like the house party with DJ Swift and Cool, and Sunday afternoons. And so I went from doing my evening show in Vernon to doing weekends on Zed and living back with my mom and dad in Richmond.
What was it like to work for Brad Phillips?
It's pretty awesome to look at it now because he's just retired. I saw his his back to school season photo on his Facebook page where he's like, "Yeah, I'm golfing. It feels weird not to be going back to work." But it was like Brad Phillips and Pat Cardinal and Gary Russell had a chance to work with all of them through the years, and just like that's like the LG Morning Zoo. Like that's that era of LG radio that I grew up listening to. Jeff Reckner doing Drive, Morning Zoo, Dean Hill in the mornings, and Graham Hatch and all them, and then Howie the Hitman at night, and assorted other people, David Kay and Cat Stewart and others. And so to work with Brad, who was the orchestrator of that, was just awesome. He would just do little things to inspire. We had a little brown paper bag in the control room, and he would hotline you. And if you did a great break, he's like, "Buzz, go and bag a burger." And so like there were McDonald's, Whopper, whatever, Wendy's coupons in the bag. I bagged a burger. One time we were doing the sticker spotting. I got to do that on Zed too when I started, because I was just doing weekends. So I got to be the first sticker spotter that we had at Zed. And he didn't think we were being sexy and excited about it enough on the radio. So we had one of our Thursday meetings, and there's 15, 20 of us in the room. And he's like, "Who has a sticker on their car?" About 6 of us put our hands up. And he just goes around and drops $100 bill on our lap. And everybody else was like, "What?" And those of us who got one were like, "Yes." And he's like, see, it's $100, but look how excited the listeners are. Now take that and go and do it on the radio. And famously, he would come in and on our whiteboard write 10.0, like we were gunning for a 10 share. I think one summer we got up to a 12.5 or a 13. And he would constantly remind us that these are the good old days. Like, and we had a huge staff. We had a full-time street machine driver back then. There were half a dozen ops, and we had mix show DJs, and swing was a shift, and we had a newsroom. Valerie Ambrose was doing our morning news. And so it was the good old days. And he left us to go and do Chum in Toronto, and then went on to do TV, and then came back to Chorus for his final act. But yeah, it's just to be with somebody who built such legends was pretty cool.
And Z95 was it the first top 40 on FM? Because the Hit on Hit went away in the early 90s, I think, for a number of markets.
Hit on Hit was a thing for Zed.
Okay, so I'm sorry. So Hit on Hit was still years from going away, but like a top 40 on FM, there weren't too many of them in big markets across Canada.
No, that was like the beginning. I'm trying to think of I don't know if Zed was before or after the Powers in Calgary and Edmonton, but Cool in Ottawa was one of the stations that I was trying to get a job with back in 93. But it was all around that era. So what did we have to do? We had to do uniques. So we had to play songs that weren't charting or weren't anywhere. And so that's where you have Zed breaking acts like Jamiroquai and Ace of Base, and like Joe Nichols was the music director, and we were just so far ahead on everything. And like Moist, we were the first radio station to play Moist. I played their song Picture Elvis off a DAT tape in the control room. So that kind of helped Zed stand out, the Hit on Hit, I think.
Yeah, so now I'm going to name drop. How did Bobby Gale manage to get Moist as an independent promoter onto Zed before he managed to get it onto, CFox?
Well, that's Joe Nichols, right? He was the music director, and he would get the stuff on. And like I said, it was just like some stuff would come up with a CD cart, say CD 2145 cut 6, and some said Run Wild. And so there was just like the old cassette deck thing with DAT tapes, and you'd have to go and find it. Sybil Thrasher or Indecision or Moist, or like we were Thomas Donovan. Like I still have some of the Zed compilation discs from back in the 90s and just the artists. We played Rose Chronicles. We broke Rose Chronicles. We were big into network artists. Back when a radio station could be influential, we had to be different. We got a lot of our stuff out of the UK. We ran a show called UK Chart Attack, and we had the New Music Hour. And so those songs would kind of get like 4 nights a week. We were playing new music for an hour from 10 to 11 or 11 to 12. And that was what Joe Nichols and then later Curtis Strange would do. And that just kind of, people were listening to it. There was no other way to discover in 1993 new music. And so, stuff got a chance to get feedback.
And by 1996, Zed was sold, I think.
We went from went from South Fraser Broadcasting to Standard in 1996. And that's where some of the changes happened. That's when Brad moved on to go to Chum in Toronto. And that's where Eric Samuels came in to run us from the Bear in Edmonton.
That's right. So he was my program director, but Edmonton, and you have an opportunity to go find yourself a house where you could look at, say, the ocean.
I love Edmonton for about 3 blocks either side of the valley. And then after that, it's just like, well, I might as well be anywhere between the mountains and Thunder Bay. If you can find an area looking at the North Saskatchewan, I think you're fine. The rest of it, I don't like it.
You see, I'd argue with you, except in all 3 places I lived in Edmonton, we're within a couple blocks of the river valley.
Yeah, right. Give me the trees and the water and some topography, and it's okay. The rest of it is just flat industrial park, like what most of Calgary is, frankly.
And I had Eric Samuels on the show. I mean, it must have been like 5 years ago at this point that I had him on. But one of the things I do remember from the conversation was giving away a house. Some of the more larger than life promotions of all time. And you gave away a house or a condo?
We gave away Suite 501 in the 501. So this is when Yaletown is getting redeveloped, and it's one of the first buildings that they put up. So it's where Carlos and Charlie's was. Is that what the Mexican place that would look like an old auto garage? We're talking like right at the foot of the Granville Street Bridge, right on the edge of Yaletown. Like, fantastic location today. And so we just kind of went on and said, at some point in the next whenever, we're going to take caller 501, give away Suite 501, and the building was called the 501. And so we did weeks of pre-programming and promotion. David Bowie came and performed a set in the trailer that they had set up. David Bowie played a real estate building trailer. And so it was all that sort of stuff to promote it. And then just randomly would take caller 501. And it was somebody from up on the Sunshine Coast whose kid was going to be going to university in the fall. And they got it, and the kid didn't have to worry about a comms. We fried the phone lines. That's why somebody won it from the Sunshine Coast, because everything would go down. Like, Zed was so big back in the day. Like, when we would do sticker spotting events, it got to the point where like we were doing them at gas stations or in a Blockbuster Video parking lot, like, come on by, and everybody comes by, gets envelopes and random cash in them. That we were making other radio stations traffic reports. The police didn't like us doing them. And so finally we would end up going to places that had big parking lots where you could weave people around, so like Thunderbird Stadium, or up at the top of Mount Seymour. We did one up there, and there was a line getting up to the top of Mount Seymour for people to get their sticker stuff. And so, yeah, like that 96 to 2000 era was just so big. We also gave away a new life for the new millennium. So this was 99 to 2000. So you got the condo out in like Surrey, Cloverdale, got a car, a boat, paid a bunch of your bills, and gave you a dog, because, life is complete without a dog. So we covered adoption fees on that. But again, just massive, like, Eric went bigger and bigger every single time.
So you're obviously well versed in the 90s as it pertains to top 40 music. And I sort of look at, and it's funny because this is 25 years this year, but 1998 is that's the year when the 90s are at its peak. Every boy band is hitting it.
Well, it's more like, just about. Like that is right on the edge of, 98. It's more 99, but 98, sure.
But we're also not into Napster territory yet when it starts to really splinter. I think I look at maybe 98, like where there was a lot of rock pop too kicking about, the Semisonics and the Third Eye Blinds you could play it on CFox. You could also play it on Z95.
Yeah. And we were playing Soundgarden and Nirvana and Metallica on Z, and it was playing on CFox. It's interesting when you say like that has been 25 years, because everybody hails 1984 is the greatest year of pop music. And there's that book about it that I keep reserving at the library and never going and picking up. But maybe somebody needs to write that 25 years later book about 1998 being that thing. Cause you're right. You have Spice Girls, you have, that pop rock, Friends is massive. So that's like your Rembrandts and Soul Asylum and Gin Blossoms and all that stuff. Pretty good time. Will Smith is just about to be with the Millennium. Sheryl Crow. Lilith Fair is huge.
And the only difference between the Backstreet Boys' I Want It That Way and why it's not on rock radio is because Nickelback didn't sing it.
Pretty much. I mean, Nickelback gets it for the formula, but how can you not like them? Because they put on a great show and they're great guys.
Yet all through the 90s, one of the other things to come out of it was the internet. And you've always sort of had this thing with technology and an understanding of websites and been quite attracted to all things tech. And you even had, I think, CyberBuzz started in the 90s as well, which was a syndicated radio piece about the internet.
Yeah. I got my website, cyberbuzz.com, 1996. And a buddy of mine, Tom Shipman, who was Tom McFly on air, he was doing a tech feature with Howie. Because, I came in and I don't know if I get a lot of credit for it or if I managed to build a brand around being techish. It's really Howie Kogan and Joe Nichols who blazed the trail, and Stacks of Wired magazine in the music office, and those guys really got it. My buddy Tom was doing this radio show with Howie, and with Mark Saltzman was doing tech stuff with Tom and Howie too. But they were doing like a tech minute thing, and he wanted something a little more hip and less CKNW, more Z, right? So we started CyberBuzz and pitched it, and ended up going for 4 or 5 years on radio stations around Canada and in Australia and on Armed Forces Radio Network. And that was a fun little thing to just do a 60-second feature about radio. I guess when you talk about syndicating, that was my syndicated thing, right? You do one piece of work and sell it 100 times. That's the way to win. Ryan Seacrest and Rick Dees and Casey Kasem, that's how you do it. Write one show and sell it 100 times. But that was the kind of thing that I did back then, a 60-second explainer on Napster or Google or Wikipedia. Yeah, so that was fun. And it's weird how I fell into the internet. It was just like a local community group in Vancouver asked me to come and do a bulletin board chat with some kids after school one day. And I did it. And I was like, wow, this is wild. We had a Commodore 64 in the early 80s, and my brother and I would write out programs from Compute's Gazette. And I wanted to be an astronaut and drive the space shuttle when I was a kid. So tech and all that stuff sort of interested me. And then after I did that chat, I learned what the internet was about. Then I went out and spent $3,000 on a, 512 meg computer. I don't know, just some big brown box that I eventually painted gold and got online.
What did you think the relationship between the internet and radio was back then? And I'm sort of thinking, can you think of a time when you may have gone to a program director or a general manager or head of tech somewhere and said, we really need a website. We need it to do this because.
No, I followed the trail that Howie and Joe had blazed. Eventually, when they moved on, then I was helping design the website. Hey, we have to have JavaScript with our ISP and everything. When you go back in the Wayback Machine, has to not be able to show up anymore because it doesn't work. I guess I always saw the internet for radio stations as the pamphlet, as the show notes, as the archive. Let's put our countdown up there every week. When you interview an artist, let's get the interviews up. Let's put extra content in there. I guess CyberBuzz started as a cool site of the day sort of thing where I would write a weekly column for the station's website and then eventually my own, talking about cool websites and tech. But, at one point we even had Zmail, a Hotmail sort of thing where you could get Matt at zmail.com. And some of that stuff was pushed by like the ISP who wanted new stuff. But I'm always kind of embarrassed that I was there in 1996 and I could have bought a bunch of domains. And I knew some of the people who went on to do big things and I was following, and I could have done that. But either I stopped doing it too early, or it was always just a side hobby, and radio has always been the important thing. Yeah. And I stayed up on it until I had kids in 2007. That's kind of when the internet stuff kind of faded for me a little bit.
And that's also around the time that social media took off, coincidentally.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
I don't think the two are related.
I remember like it was MySpace that was really huge for me as a radio guy, where I was getting like hundreds of thousands of views on content. I would do show notes every day after my show and put them on my MySpace. And that was when I was doing Drive on Z at the time. That was big and led to drive traffic to my personal websites. But now this is pre AdSense and trying to monetize or anything, but just general traffic was good. And MySpace is that because it was so personalized, you could have, all the colors and the flashing themes so it's just kind of a victim of 90s web design. And, Facebook comes on in the, 05, 06. Yeah. And it's clean and simple. And then it just goes from there. Yeah.
Meanwhile, Matt is still enjoying GeoCities.
Hollywood Hills /4414 or 4454. I was on GeoCities in the Alanis Morissette era of the mid-late 90s. And that's where I got Virpi Maninen. I haven't said that name in forever, but she was a huge Alanis fan from Finland. And her and I would talk on GeoCities all the time. Okay. Aside.
Well, just want to talk a little bit about Milkman, because he was also one of the first, to start community. But you mentioned posting your show notes on MySpace, but yet you're a regular contributor to his milk prep board, and you would sometimes put your stuff up there too. And I thought, boy, this would be great if it didn't happen 3 hours ago. I was in the East.
Yeah. Again, another person who was there at the beginning, right? And saw it and has ridden it for 25 years now and made a nice little side hustle / second career for himself out of it. Yeah. Do I wish I would have gone and done that? Probably. That would have been very nice to have going on the side, but somebody else did it. He did a great job with it.
Well, what URL would you have purchased? I mean, you could have got pets.com. Like, what would you have?
I know, right? So I got cyberbuzz.com, which in the mid 90s was pretty cool. Cyber was a pretty hot word.
Well, I was going to ask you about that because cyber meant something.
It did. And I was almost the cyberbuzz.com. And then when I went to actually go and do the registration, cyberbuzz.com had expired. Somebody from Hong Kong or whatever had it, because like a couple weeks before it was like $10,000 you can buy it. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. And then I just went to register and I got it. So cyberbuzz.com was pretty cool. And then I had cyberbuzz.tv and .net, and I still have like 25 URLs, but just mostly my family names and, my blogging stuff. But yeah, should have bought, going into the URL business would have been good too. Like I can see things coming, but I'm just so far ahead before the waves hit that I just kind of give up when it still ripples.
Well, would you like to buy radio.com? That's for sale.
What are you going to do with radio.com? I mean, sell it to iHeart? Do they even have it?
Odyssey has it. They don't even want it anymore.
Which is, well, but it doesn't, a URL doesn't matter anymore unless it's related to your name. X is valuable for Musk to change it from Twitter. But, sometimes I'll see reading commercials now even, and the URL doesn't match the business name. I'm just like, what are you doing? I mean, maybe you couldn't get it, but that's the only way I think URLs matter. It's almost like you have to choose the business name based on what's available on social or URLs. Now, I wrote an article one of the freelance things I did was I wrote a tech column for 24, the commuter newspaper. And I have the article. It's in our bathroom downstairs. My wife framed it. And it's talking when you choose your baby name, make sure you get the domain name when your baby's born. So both of my sons have their name.com as web URLs. Maybe and back then some people were choosing baby names based on which domain they can get. Don't know if it matters now, but
if I had a chance to start my company again, I wouldn't have called it Sound Off. I mean, in 2014, I thought, well, this is going to work. And then out come the smart speakers, and both of them are commands.
Sound off.
It's a complete clusterfuck for every sound command. Like, you don't want to have like a new show called Start Here, like ABC does in New York. Like the smart speakers come out, and like the smart speaker looks like, what the hell do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? Sound off or Start Here?
I know. Well, even I can't even get I can't even get it to say XL 103 half the time, or try and get on, like, you know, if I want to listen to Zed from Vancouver on my Apple speaker, I can't. No idea how to make it work. Which is sad. You know, I want a kitchen radio. Good luck finding a kitchen radio.
And you've done every shift practically on Z95.
I think everything but middays. I did traffic fill in one time. I produced for Rona Raskin on Sex, Lies, and Audio Tape. Did New Year's Eve, Christmas Day. Yeah. I slept at the radio station a couple of times because of this. Like, I knew snow was coming. And so I would go the night before knowing I was doing mornings during Christmas week and I didn't want to get stuck. So I'd sleep at the radio station the night before. But yeah, I didn't like Zed at the beginning. It was pretty tribal. I grew up on LG 73, right? And then Zed launches in the spring of 1991. And I was like, the Oilers got McDavid and I'm a Flames fan. But, you know, eventually, how could you not love it? There was just so much energy around that radio station and the look. You know, they were selling merch in dog's ear boutiques, and I still have both of my Zed shirts, like a radio station that sells merch, and it was wanted and craved. And the Zed sticker is still so ubiquitous from the 90s. You know, we had so many different iterations of it. You still go down alleys of Davie Street and find them on the back of Smithrights or old cars out in the valley where they're covered in Zed stickers. You know, it's just such an epic time to be in top 40 radios. Like Brad says, it really was the good old days.
Sound Off Podcast supports Podcasting 2.0. So feel free to send us a boost if you're listening on a newer podcast app. If you don't have a newer podcast app, you can get one at newpodcastapps.com.
So one of the things I didn't get about later part of the 90s, maybe even into the 2000s, is when stations started to muck about with their brands. Well, we don't need to call it Zed anymore. We're going to call it Crave, or we're going to call it Virgin. Or if you're going to be in Ottawa, we're not going to call it Cool anymore. We're going to call it Bob, or whatever the next thing was that came after it. And by the way, here's the T-shirt. Thanks for growing up with us. The good old days are over.
Yeah. Well, Zed really had, like, it was so big, and then, you know, everything comes down, right? And so you have the sign on of the Beat at 94.5, and it comes out guns a-blazing, playing all the hip-hop and R&B stuff. And Zed's huge book was a summer book, but it was always CKNW, CHQM, Light Rock, Less Talk, your favorites, Gloria Estefan, Michael Bolton, Rod Stewart, John Cicada, Sarah McLachlan. Like, you know, you can hear the commercials now. You have QM cutting out your shoulders and the Beat cutting out your ankles, right? And where Zed for a while could have signal dominance over LG and play similar music and could be a 12 to 44-year-old radio station. Now, all of a sudden, times were changing and things got tight. So there were many logo changes. God, I remember one of our logos was a very, very thin, narrow Z, which became tough to put in newspapers and stuff because it was just kind of too tight and didn't fit a square. So if you tried to shrink it down to the same size of everybody else's, it was like pencil thin. But it was kind of like a real estate, like a condo building. Like this is when Yaletown's getting redeveloped, right? And it kind of looked like the logo of a real estate building, but it was sleek and elegant, had browns and cements and black in it. And then Z blows up and eventually we become Crave, I guess, which Eric did. And that was trying to get,
I'm sorry.
Sorry, that's my Siri. Trying to get back into QM ranks and trying to become a 2544 station again, 2534. And then the Virgin thing was just with the Astral buy, right? Like they had to have, when they did the licensing for Virgin, they had to have a certain number of stations run with the Virgin branding across the country. So we were the one on Horseshoe Way to have that. That party was fun. Phil Evans was our promotions director at the time. I've worked with some, like you talk about the program directors, but some pretty epic promotions directors as well who came up with this stuff. Kerry Maxwell, Phil Evans, and Dave with a W. Can't remember the name. Like everybody just thought big. And back then we had the budgets, but the launch party for Virgin, like we were encouraged to be edgy and out there. And so we had a guy walking around our party naked for no reason. Just like he was stark naked, just walking around the party, just small talk. Like, of course he's supposed to be there. And we did it at the restaurant on the top of the bathrooms at Kitts Beach. Phil did the SUVs like they were Ford Explorers, did them up like planes. And so our street team were the flight crew. So they had all vintage 60s flight outfits where there was body painting going on and there was like tarot reading and fire tossing and a naked guy walking around. I think I still have the picture, and it's like everybody who was there, like all our clients and the staff for the launch, we gave it away to some listeners. And then just one random naked guy over in the corner.
Is that when Richard Branson comes in and sprays everybody with champagne and walks out?
Yeah, I wasn't there for Sir Richard's visit. I got to interview him on the phone once when we did the launch. I was lucky I got to do the launch. I don't remember much about it, but I remember, interviewing him for the launch of that. That was pretty cool. And then Ronnie Stanton was there by the time we did the launch for Virgin. And we went to like 6-day-a-week shifts. We were each doing 3-hour shifts, and you would do a Saturday shift and then the next weekend get both of them off. But because the shifts were so short, you pulled, 11 out of 14. And Ronnie had like a great theory about that was like, why does everybody do it Monday to Friday? 2/7 of your QM and Reach and TSL can be on the weekend. And so he devoted resources to the weekend. I remember when Brother Jake started in Vancouver, he was like Saturdays and Sundays. Like that was what he did on Rock 101. And it was a Monday to Friday morning show with the Joke Guy and all of them doing their things. We had that for a while. Howie Kogan came in and did like a full morning show on Saturdays and Sundays. I think stations could do well with that, having good bench strength for holiday time. It was Joe Leary used to have Fred Latrimo's cover in Vancouver at Kiss FM. And so Fred didn't work Fridays except in the book. And he had 11 billion holiday days. So Fred was making his starts with a 4, starts with a 5, starts with a 6, whatever it was. And then Joe came in and made high 5, low 6 figures. I don't know what it was back in the day to work 2/3 of the, just work Fridays and his holiday time. And it was like, that's a pretty nice part-time gig. It was pretty sweet back in the day.
Yeah. If you're going to listen Monday to Friday, anytime, and then you can turn on the radio Saturday and still hear some sort of resemblance to what you heard Monday to Friday, why not? Saturday is just an absolute gold mine for a radio station right up until 3:00 to just have some consistency with the whole thing. And as well, people on Saturday, they got more time to dedicate and listen to your show. So why would you have somebody who's never on Monday to Friday in that period? I get it. Totally.
Right. And the weekends are such an errand thing. Like it's not, we know they're in the car between 4:30 and 6:00. They're in and out of the car the whole time, but if you give them a reason to stay, maybe there's less punching on the weekend. And we can piss and shit on voice tracking out of market and all that stuff. It still is better than what it used to be when, they cut the shows and just ran jukeboxes. I think the people who are voice tracking now, I don't think in Canada we're as run ragged. Like I'll follow Shitty Radio PD or Shitty Radio Jock on Instagram, and they talk about the people doing that was, this is on 7 stations and 4 formats and 3 cities or whatever it is. I don't think it's that bad here. I don't think it's autopilot. I think people really put an effort in to understand where they are and what they're doing. And that's why I don't have an ethical problem with what I do on Zed. My parents still live there. I go back 3 times a year. It's a city I grew up in, and I think I could do a show as if I was there. So even if I'm voice tracking the morning show on Zed and then doing a morning show in Calgary, I think it still sounds pretty damn local.
Yeah, actually, some of my favorite shows are just voice tracked into the market because they're talented people. They're well done. I love listening to Fearless Fred. I get to listen to Fearless Fred. I get to listen to Lynch, Greg B. Harrell.
Oh, Tyler and Lynch do such a great job. I remember when they were doing weekdays at X in Calgary, and I was up in Sundre or I don't know, on some camping trip with my son and flipping around, and there they are doing a weekend show. And I'm like, yeah, that's tight. I think repurposing content, like what we do, we being Stingray with Katie and Ed, where, they do a morning show and then it's Katie and Ed at night and it's on stations right across the country. It's like, just think about all the great radio that you did that it was for 30,000 people who are listening for that minute and it never comes back. So, the web gets to archive it. You could drive it back there, but to really recycle and rerun it, I think it can be smart programming.
There's still a lot of radio stations who are wasting it. They are doing great content. They're doing it once. Not enough people hear it. And especially when you're Stingray and you've got all these radio stations and you can roll them out to various blocks. And I kind of like the fact that Real Country 95.5 with Vinny and Randy. Yeah,
and Randy. How could you not remember Randy's name? She's been on your show 14 times.
That's twice. But I've also called her like 3 different names at 3 different times.
Oh, okay.
That's what I was struggling with.
Yeah, but they do. That's great, right? They're right across the province.
I might have had her on 3 times.
But I have guilt, and I have to get over it, of doing something in the 6 and then bringing it back in the 8. And our consultant is like, that thing you did at 6 o'clock is like, that's great. That's great content, but that's your lowest quarter hour. And why aren't you bringing that back for 3 times the audience at 8 o'clock? And he's like, whether you go on, like you're recording things and rip it off the logger and run it as is, or you try to redo it, and redoing it'll never work, frankly. But he's like, do it again. And, that's something Melissa, who is Katie and Ed's producer on AMP, she's really good at bringing stuff back, and she'll do something Thursday at 8 a.m. and then bring it back the next Tuesday at 6 a.m. and just, constantly distilling their content, and just the good stuff gets to air all the time.
Yeah, and it's a good thing. You could bring back some of your stuff from the 90s that you saved on digital.
I can get a real audio player. But you know what? Saving the stuff is one of the greatest things that I did back in the day, because I do bring it back. On the 90s show that I run on Zed, I play old interviews that I did with Spice Girls and Puff Daddy and No Doubt, and my Atlantis interview. It must be sitting on a reel somewhere. And even this week, the Rolling Stones are back with a new album, right? Well, I interviewed Mick Jagger when he did an album with Rob Thomas in like 2002 or something. And so I've just got little clips of him, or, the station, Classic Hit Station. I interviewed Barry White because one of my co-hosts was like, that was the freaky music for her and her husband, Sarah Jewell. She's now a writer in the Maritimes. So for Valentine's Day one year, I got her a gift because Barry White was huge on Ally McBeal. I'm like, let's call it Barry White. Well, now I've got Barry White interviews that I can run 25 years later on a Classic Hit Station. And it's a lot. Yeah. Reusing and recycling is not bad.
Oh, you really did keep some stuff. I was thinking maybe you let some of it go, but you did keep it. Good for you.
No. Oh God, no. Red Robinson was across the hall. when I was at Zed, he was doing mornings on Sea Isle. And he would be like, oh, it's Buddy Holly. And all the time, Buddy Holly and I went for Triple O burgers at White Spot. And then he would play the tape, and the hallways were filled with the photos. And so that just kind of got me. It's just like, I'm doing that now. Maybe my Sue Medley and Boulevard interviews and Harem Scarum that I did in Vernon would have been something if I had saved them, but I didn't. So then I started. And so Cardigans and In Excess and Chris Shepard and so just everything. I got it. And then I tried to get people to sign a CD for me. So I've got some memories in the basement, and, Beyonce's birthday this week, and got an interview with her when she was 16 and a photo. And it's like, yeah, that's pretty cool.
I have the Alanis interview from 1991 kicking around here somewhere.
That's my favorite era.
Yes, like long before she, had
Alanis, no more a set.
Right.
Alanis. Yes. I had such a crush on her. It was a running joke for my first year and a half at Zed, because we were still playing No Regrets. And gosh, I can't remember the other one from Now Is the Time, album number 3. But and then all of a sudden she comes in the summer of 1995. And I hosted the album launch party at Automotive Pool Hall. And then she went and did a set at the Starfish Room, like 80 people. I'm just like, oh, do you remember I interviewed you all these times and I asked you to be my date for the Junos and then so I have a poster downstairs that just says, hey, again. And yeah, I don't know if she remembers to this day, but I remind her I had a bad crush.
How did you get to Calgary? And why did you get to Calgary?
I got blown out. So 3 years in Vernon, 16 in Vancouver. And, 16 is a pretty good run. So I got blown out summer of 2009. And they put Kai and Tara Jean doing afternoon drive. And Kevin Lim was coming in the radio station. So like all super talented people. Yeah, just one of those things. You go into a meeting and Brad Phillips and Ronnie Stanton are both there. And there's a brown envelope on the table and a guy waiting for you in the room next door, talk about stuff. So yeah, that was July 2009. It was the hottest day of the year. Wife was pregnant. We just got married. It was a hard time. And I sent out tapes and I started working with Momentum Media, buddy, just like, hey, can I hang out in your office just so I have somewhere to go for 6 hours a day? And so I started, thinking about radio features on social media, the Social 60, and helping and working on syndication stuff like that. I went in one day and I said, I think that's it. I think my microphone is off. I think I'm done and I'm ready for an office job. And then a week later, I got a call from Maz asking me for an interview. And so I interviewed with Pat Cardinal first, and then flew out to Calgary and interviewed with Maz and Vinka. And then a week later, I had a job offer. And by Christmas of 2009, I was driving through the snow with all of my stuff in the back of a car and deathly afraid of it freezing if I left it outside overnight. And moved here. So I was lucky. Pat Cardinal gave me that second chance, and Steve Jones, who's been huge in my career over the past 14, 15 years. I guess, that's the thing when I look at it, the people who I've had watching over me, Brad Phillips, Eric Samuels, okay, Ronnie Stanton blows me out, but I still have a good relationship where I Facebook and talk to him and give him a big hug if I saw him again. And then I come here and it's been 15 years under Steve Jones and Ian Lurie running the whole ship back from Astral days. So yeah, I've just had really great people who believed in me and have given me second, third, fourth chances to keep at it. So yeah, that's how I end up at Calgary. I was actually hired to do AMP. So the top 40 station. I was doing mornings at AMP with Blake. We were Buzz and Blake. And then she left after a year to go to Toronto, and then couldn't find anybody for me. And I was just floundering. And then again, I go into a meeting. Vinka and Don Stevens are in the room. And Vinca has an envelope and Don Stevens has an envelope. And Vinca's envelope is a severance package. And Don Stevens' envelope is, I want you to come and do middays on XL for me. And it was a big cut in pay. But I was just like, all right, I guess it's time to go to the seniors tour and start playing the classic hits. And so it was 7 years of middays. And now it's been five and a bit years of mornings. You know, Don had a heart attack and some back surgery, and I filled in for him for 2 weeks with Joanne and Coach. And that became the chance that I had, where they told management, it's like, this guy's good. He could do it. And so then once Don decided to retire, then that's where I got it.
You talked about all the great people you worked with, and station-wise, you didn't work for any losers. They're all winners.
Right? Like CJIB, even back in the day, it was just us and a country station who just happened to be programmed by James Stewart Hewson across the street back in the day, right? Like not a bad, like, let's drop another legend in the talk. But they were country and we weren't. And so we were a 60 share, 70 share. Yeah. And then go to Z, ride that for all the peaks. And then XL, which was just, classic hits at the right time with heritage call letters and, coming in the heels of Don Stevens. I liken it sometimes to, who's that guy that took over for Dick Clark? Nobody knows, but there was a guy for a little bit. I just kind of feel like that's me, but this, the station's pivoting and it's getting younger with the approach, and it's a different time for radio.
You can totally take a classic hit station younger.
Oh, for sure.
More than ever. Yeah.
No, yeah, you totally can, and everybody is. Even before Q107 flipped to talk here in Calgary, they were adding Soul Asylum and Gin Blossoms and stuff like that. We have a 90s station here in Calgary that they brand themselves as 90s, and that may be their wheelhouse, but they'll still go into some current, like they'll play Adele or they'll play ABBA, right? So you have that. And then you have your stars across the country, which are constantly reinventing what hot AC is and AMP. Like, so even AMP plays Counting Crows, and I'll come in the morning and they're across the hall. It's like, stop playing my music. It's like, I know you need to get the top end, but can you stop already? Like they'll play Counting Crows and Whitney Houston, and so will we. And that, but they play Drake and we play April Wine. So it balances out.
Gen Z understands classic hits and they love it.
Oh, totally. My son's 14. And last year I took him to see Elton John in Paris. And if Mick Jagger doesn't get COVID in Amsterdam, we would have seen the Rolling Stones the next night. So it's like, he loves Queen. And I'm like, well, do you want to go see Queen with Adam Lambert? And he's like, no, it's not the same without Freddie. And he's got his iPod in. And I'm like, what are you listening to? Oh, Ziggy Stardust. Okay. He's 14. So yeah, he gets it.
Did you get that shirt in Paris?
I ordered it. This is the French national soccer team pre-second world championship. It's only got the one. But I do love my Les Bleus.
Was that the greatest World Cup ever, even though France didn't win?
I don't.
So the answer was yes. It was yes, and you skipped past it.
No, because the first one in our era where they lost to Italy was pretty awesome, because that was my wife and I's first date. We had met the week before, and we flew to Montreal to watch the World Cup at a bar in Mile End. So
was that the one where Zinedine Zidane and the headbutt?
Zidane headbutts.
2006?
2006. Yeah. So that was my wife and I's like first weekend away. So that World Cup will always be memorable, even though we lost.
You're watching in Mile End. You're closer to the Italian part of town than anything else, or did you?
Yeah, I know. There were a lot of Italian. there was a lot of Italian. But Italian is almost French in Montreal, though. Like when I hear a francophone, like Freeway Frank, just his accent to me, that Italian, French, English, like that's a Montreal accent. It's the mix of the three.
It all comes together when we all hang around each other and sort of fumble through the languages. We all say Depener kind of the same way.
Right, exactly. Depener.
Oh, okay. So that's Cat Spencer's old bit, right?
That's Cat Spencer's
The way
bit.
you said that is the way he would say the dialing for Depener bit.
Which I've honestly never heard. I just know about.
Okay, I'm going to go looking for a clip and I'm going to put it in right here.
So I'm just going to put the show on hold for just a second. This is our on hold music. I tried hard, but I didn't find a clip of Cat Spencer doing dialing for Depeners. But I do have a clip of him recording dialing for Depeners in the studio. This was taken from an old high school video from 1998. The bit, like most great bits, had some pre-recording to it. A Depener is what they call a corner store in Montreal. You could also get beer and wine there, whereas in the rest of Canada, your beverage choices were confined to soda and Slurpees. Cat would call the store and say one of three things: hello, hi, or Depener. I believe there was a radio contestant involved who would have to guess how many times they would have an interaction in order to win a prize. But like most fun radio contests, it's not about the winning and losing, but how much fun it is for the listener to play along. And even all these years later in Montreal, if you say dialing for Depeners, people know what you're talking about.
Hello?
Hello?
Yes? Hello?
Oh, hi.
Hello?
Hello?
Yes?
Oh, hi. Is it Depener?
Yes? Yes?
Is it Depener?
Yes?
Oh, hello. Hi. Hello?
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 Yes?
Hello?
Hello?
Oh, hi.
Hi?
Hi.
Hi?
Hello. Is it Depener?
Yes?
Hello?
Who's speaking?
It's Depener?
Yes?
Oh, hi.
Hi? Hi?
Hello?
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 Hi?
Hello?
Speaking of legends, right? Like here he is 30 years later, still knocking back the 5 cassette on the beat.
Oh, I was in Montreal at Chaume when he arrived.
Yeah,
and
right.
We made fun of him when he arrived. We got some IDs out on Chaume, reminding everybody to have their cats spayed or neutered. Yeah, that guy, he got our attention and he was good. And Pat Holliday and everybody there beat us about a year later. So have you ever done a podcast?
I did one in 2006 or 7. It was called This Week in News and Entertainment. It was modeled after Pardon the Interruption. And I did it with my buddy Roger Kincaid, who was Crash when he was at X in Vancouver. And then he came and worked at Zed for a heartbeat. He just kind of walked into Eric Samuels, and Eric Samuels was looking for him, and they both just kind of went, this doesn't work. Roger's alt-rock news guy, and here he was trying to be all hype about Love Inc., and it didn't, and Brand Van 3000 just didn't fit. But whatever. But Roger's a fantastic guy and would later have success here in Calgary on alt-rock on X here and doing news on QR. So back in 2006, we started that podcast. We would go back and forth. One of us would read a headline just like Will Bond does on PTI, and then the other guy would sound off. We'd debate, bell rings, go to the next one. And it would be everything from, news and entertainment, politics to Bennifer, right? And I think we did maybe 15 or 20, but this is 2006, right? So you've got Adam Curry, me and Roger, probably Leo Laporte's Twit network, and like not much else, like really, really early days. And so getting it up and getting people to grab it was kind of like, you'd go to your MySpace and put something for people to listen to. It wasn't really easy to get. And so, we did it for a few months and then stopped. But that's another one of those things that like when I think about the concept, even today, I think it would work. I'm more of a tight produced podcast fan as opposed to 3 hours of Rogan. I want in and out. I want my story. That's why I like podcasts of radio shows that put their feature interviews up, right? Like, so give me half an hour of stuff. So, but that was, so we did a podcast for a bit, way back.
Do you like radio shows as catch-up radio or podcasts being like catch-up radio where you can listen to it later?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think that's how you have to do it. That's why I would do the show notes back in the day, right? Oh, you heard, you're in the car. You heard me talking about a cool app, a website, a news story, a hot new t-shirt. Where can I get it? Well, you're not writing it down when you're in the car. And I even find myself, because the radio shows that I listen to are off podcasts. And if I'm listening live and I miss something, I'm hitting my back 15 seconds button that doesn't exist. Can you say, I missed it. Can you say that again? Like, time shifting is real life now. The only reason I have a cable subscription is for the 6 o'clock news, which I most often PVR and watch later, watching sports. And then my wife likes to have house shows on just randomly on a Saturday afternoon. But at night when I'm settling in, getting ready for the next day, I'm going into whichever streaming service. I'm watching Drops of God right now, which is a couple of years old. It's a Japanese, French, English show about wine. A friend recommended, so I just started it. But I'm watching that. But here it is. It's like 3 years old. Back in the day, if you didn't watch that very special episode of Webster, you never saw that very special episode of Webster. So repurposing the content has to happen. And hopefully my show will get to a point where I have breaks that are worth repurposing. Right now, Samantha and I just kind of have fun and goof off. We're 5 weeks in, so it's not super focused and featured, but we'll get there.
I was going to ask you, give me an early review of that, because she's a few months removed from doing her own show at Peggy 99.1 in Winnipeg. She's moved up to Calgary. You have rescued her, or she escaped, either one. But she was leading the show at 99.1, and then you guys got to come together, and there's a lot of role definition that has to be sort of figured out, and who does what when, and trying to learn from each other at the same time. Sounds like a busy 5 weeks.
Yeah, but she's such a pro. And that was something that we talked about. Is I had been doing my own thing for about a year and a half. She'd been doing it for a while. So we both know how to drive. So it comes like, which one of us is going to drive. And I think it quickly became, I'm a formatics guy. My peak of I have yet to be super successful in mornings, even though this is the 1, 2, 3, 4th try, 5th try. I don't know. Afternoon drive was really where I had my biggest ratings, and those are my heydays, I think. And so I work our morning show like an afternoon drive show, right? Like, I'm fast paced on the back, sell something quick, and then it's Samantha to be the star after that. So, but without touching the buttons and doing back sells and stuff, I fade. On another show, I was on the other side and somebody else was opping, and the consultant said, "How about we switch things up?" And then a week later, I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm a different jock. I'm more focused. My heart rate's up because I'm pressing buttons, watching clocks." So that was pretty easy for us to figure out, just because I kind of asked, like, I need that part. But the rest of it, Sam and we've been in the business pretty much the same time. We both started in the early 90s, and we're both just ready for our final act, right? It's like, you want this to be your last job? Yes, I want this to be my last job. This is like, are we going to be awesome and ride into the sunset? Yes. And there's no ego. There is complete compromise and professionalism and just understanding what it takes to win. And it doesn't matter if it's her laugh or my laugh or her break idea, or she shoots down all of the things that I have to offer, which happens. But I'm just like, yeah, okay, I want to do this, blah, blah, blah. Do you get it? No? Okay, well, you're a female in our demo. And if you don't get it, all right, let's move on. What do you think we should do? And let's go with there. So it's been awesome. Let's say that.
And where can you repurpose that break that hits the cutting room floor? Like, can you take that elsewhere to something else, like whether it's social media?
Yeah. So like what we are doing now is we're putting them up on social, right? So just those screen cap things with the bouncy waveforms so that you can get people on social. Yeah. And a lot of radio companies in the country have been slapped by Mr. Zuckerberg as news stations. And we're talking rock stations and pop stations just because they're with Bell or they're with Rogers or whatever. So we don't want that to happen. So it's a lot of original content generation that we want to do. And so that's repurposing morning show bits on social as, just 90 seconds or 45 seconds, and not enough for a podcast, but enough that somebody can see it later in the day and hopefully change their habits the next morning.
So you haven't been flagged yet at XL for...
No, Stingray's still good. And Rogers, I think a lot of Rogers are still good. From what I've seen, it's mostly Bell.
Yeah. One of your Stingray stations in Kentville, Nova Scotia has been got flagged. But, when you look at what's important to, rural Nova Scotia, it's all summer, it's been floods and road closures, and you stick a link up and here's my conspiracy theory is that it's being done because if you can tag a radio station, they'll talk about it.
Yeah, yes. It's interesting. I had my first incident with the ban today. And I always went, who goes to Facebook to get their news? I'm getting my news from Twitter, from newspapers, from original sources. I want Facebook for pictures of my friends and stuff like that. But then I run a community group for just our local 10 block radius. And one of the daycares has an E. coli outbreak here. So I saw the story on Global and I cut and paste. I wanted to go and put it in our local Facebook group. Hey, anybody who sends a kid, this is the story. Ding, ding, ding. Wouldn't let me do it. I cut and pasted the article. It was just, hey, let's plagiarize it to get the information out. Ding. So, because it said global news reports in there. So I cut out one sentence and then put it back up again. Ta-da! So it's in. So you can still get news on Facebook. You just have to scrape it, which is even worse than them linking out to it.
And it's really too bad that CyberBuzz still isn't going, because you could do a whole 1 minute episode of how to do that, send it out to the radio stations, and then we would all know it.
Oh, 1 minute episode. Yeah, 60 seconds plus the 30 adjacent.
These are fascinating times. I can't thank you enough for taking way too much time to do this podcast with me.
Yeah, I listened to Boomer for over an hour. I don't know if anybody's made it to the goodbye on this one, but thanks for having me nonetheless.
The Sound Off Podcast is written and hosted by Matt Kundle. Produced by Evan Serminski. Edited by Chloe Emo Lane. Social media by Aiden Glassy. Another great creation from the Sound Off Media Company. There's always more at soundoffpodcast.com.